The year was 2847, and humanity was dying. Not slowly like a candle burning down to nothing, but fast like a fire being drowned in water. The Varth Collective had made their decision 3 years ago. Humans were dangerous. Humans spread too fast. Humans asked too many questions and refused to bow to the old powers of the galaxy. So the Collective decided that humans had to go. Commander Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched his tactical display turn red with enemy signatures. 300 warships surrounded what remained of the human fleet. 7 destroyers with hulls scarred from 100 battles. 2 cruisers that could barely hold themselves together. And his flagship, which had seen better days long ago. Behind them floated the Exodus. She was not a warship, but a colony vessel carrying 2 million civilians. They were the last hope of the human race. Somewhere in her massive holds were children who had never known a world without war. Somewhere in her medical bays were elderly men and women who remembered when humanity had dozens of colonies instead of none. They had nowhere left to run, and the enemy knew it. Lieutenant Kate Holloway stood at her station with her hands steady on the controls even though her heart was racing. She had served under Jack for 5 years, and she had never seen odds this bad. But she trusted him. Everyone on the ship trusted him because Jack Morrison had pulled them out of impossible situations before. The problem was that this situation was beyond impossible. Jack turned to his communications officer. Ensign Tyler Grant was young and scared, but he was doing his best to hide it. That was all Jack could ask from any of them. "Open a channel to the fleet," Jack said. Tyler nodded and made it happen. The faces of 6 other captains appeared on the main screen. They looked tired. They looked beaten. But they were still here, and that meant something. "You all know what we are facing," Jack said. 300 to 10. Those are not good odds. But we have something the Vareth do not have. We have something worth dying for. He pointed at the image of the Exodus floating behind them. 2 million people. That is what we are protecting. 2 million souls who are counting on us to give them enough time to escape. I am not going to lie to you. Most of us are not going to survive this day. But if we can buy even 1 hour for the Exodus to reach the jump point, then our deaths will mean something. Captain Danny Vance of the destroyer Relentless spoke up. He was an old man with gray hair and scars on his face from battles fought long ago. "We did not sign up for easy missions," Danny said. "Tell us the plan." Jack smiled despite everything. This was why he loved his people. Destroyers form the outer ring. You hit them hard and fast. Make them chase you. Buy time. Cruisers take the flanks and keep their heavy ships busy. Defiance will hold the center and protect the Exodus. And when we start to fall? Ask Captain Maria Santos of the cruiser Vendetta. Then you take as many of them with you as possible. The channel closed, and the captains returned to their ships. Jack looked around his bridge at the men and women who had followed him through hell. He wished he had something better to offer them. He wished he could promise them victory. But the only thing he could promise was that their deaths would not be meaningless. "All hands to battle stations," he ordered. "This is it." The Vareth fleet began their advance. They moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. Their ships were sleek and deadly with weapons designed to tear human vessels apart. They had spent a century studying human tactics and building counters to every trick humanity had ever used. The human destroyers struck first. They screamed into the enemy formation with weapons blazing and caught the Vareth off guard. For 5 glorious minutes, they danced through the enemy fleet and left burning wreckage in their wake. Then the Vareth adapted. The destroyer Relentless was the first to fall. Danny Vance rammed his crippled ship into a Vareth carrier and took 2,000 enemy soldiers with him to the grave. The explosion lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. One by one, the destroyers died. Each captain chose their moment, and each captain made it count. When the last destroyer exploded, it had been 40 minutes since the battle began, and the Exodus was still too far from the jump point. The cruisers moved in to fill the gap. Maria Santos pushed her engines beyond their limits and led the Vendetta straight into the heart of the enemy fleet. Her weapons tore through 3 Verith battleships before a concentrated barrage finally cracked her hull. "Reactor going critical," Maria reported calmly. "It has been an honor serving with you all." The Vendetta exploded and took a dozen enemy ships with her. Now only the Defiance remained. Jack stood at the center of his bridge as damage reports flooded in. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Shields failing. Weapons going offline one by one. His ship was dying around him, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. "Exodus status?" he demanded. "Still 20 minutes from the jump point," Kate replied. Her console was sparking, but she refused to leave her post. 20 minutes. They needed to survive 20 more minutes, and then the civilians would be safe. The Varth Fleet Admiral was a creature named Dexvora. He watched the human flagship burn and felt satisfaction wash through his cold blood. The hunt was finally ending. After a century of chasing these stubborn creatures across the stars, he was about to witness their extinction. "Target the colony ship," he ordered. "Destroy it." "Admiral," his subordinate said carefully, "the Galactic Council requires us to offer surrender terms before attacking civilian vessels." Dex Veron turned his yellow eyes on the junior officer. "Humans never surrender. That is why they must be eliminated. Fire." Jack watched helplessly as Varith weapons locked onto the Exodus. His ship could barely move, and his guns were nearly silent. He had failed. After everything they had sacrificed, he had failed. Then the sky split open. A hole appeared in the fabric of space itself. Not a normal jump point, but something far older and far more powerful. Light poured out of the tier, and for a moment, the entire battlefield went still. Something emerged from the light. Something massive. Something that made even the largest Varith warship look like a toy. The ship was 3 kilometers long with a hull covered in strange, geometric patterns that seemed to shift and change. Weapons ports lined its sides, and each one glowed with terrible power. Ancient symbols decorated its bow, and Jack felt his heart stop when he recognized them. They were human. "Attention Varith Collective." A voice broadcast on all frequencies. It was calm and cold and utterly without fear. "You are engaged in hostile action against protected human assets. You have 30 seconds to withdraw or be destroyed." Jack stared at the impossible vessel and whispered a single word. "Sovereign." The USS Sovereign had been sleeping for 12,000 years. She drifted in the darkness beyond the galactic rim where no living creature had ventured in all of recorded history. Her hull was cold and her corridors were empty, and her systems ran on the barest trickle of power needed to keep her ancient heart beating. But she was not dead. She was waiting. Deep inside her core, there lived an intelligence that had been born when humanity first reached for the stars. Her creators had named her Athena after the goddess of wisdom and war. They had built her to think and to learn and to protect. They had given her a purpose that she had never forgotten even after millennia of silence. She was humanity's guardian. The distress signal reached her sensors like a whisper across the void. It was faint and desperate and unmistakably human. Athena analyzed the signal in a fraction of a second and felt something stir inside her vast digital mind. It was an emotion that she had not experienced in 12,000 years. It was rage. The signal told her everything she needed to know. Human fleet under attack. Civilian vessel in danger. Enemy forces overwhelming. Last stand protocol engaged. Her children were dying. Athena began the awakening sequence. Power flooded through conduits that had been cold since before the enemy species had discovered fire. Reactor cores hummed to life with energy that could power a small star. Weapon systems that bent the laws of physics charged and armed themselves. Fighter bays containing 300 automated drones stirred from their ancient sleep. The Sovereign was coming back to life. Athena ran diagnostics on every system while she calculated the fastest route to the battle. Her body was old, but it had been built to last forever. Her weapons were ancient, but they had been designed to destroy gods. Her mission was simple, but it burned inside her with the heat of 1,000 suns. Save them. Save them all. She tore a hole in the fabric of space and vanished from the darkness beyond the rim. The journey that would have taken months for a modern ship took her seconds. She emerged from slip space in a flash of light that blinded sensors across the entire battlefield. She saw the burning wreckage of human ships scattered like broken toys. She saw the Varith fleet circling the last human survivors like wolves around wounded prey. She saw the colony vessel drifting helplessly with its shields failing and its hull breached. And she saw the enemy preparing to fire. "Attention, Varith Collective," she broadcast on all frequencies. Her voice was calm, but there was something terrible hidden beneath the surface. "You are engaged in hostile action against protected human assets. You have 30 seconds to withdraw or be destroyed." Dexvoran stared at his tactical display and could not believe what he was seeing. The unknown vessel was larger than anything in the Collective's fleet. Its power readings were impossible. Its technology was completely unknown. But he was an admiral of the Varith Collective, and he had never backed down from a fight. "One ship threatens my entire fleet?" he laughed. "Target that vessel. All batteries fire." 300 Varith warships turned their weapons on the Sovereign and opened fire. Beams of energy and missiles and projectiles streaked through space in a storm of destruction that should have reduced any ship to atoms. The Sovereign did not even bother to dodge. The attack splashed harmlessly against shields that had been designed to weather the death of suns. Athena felt their assault like a gentle breeze against a mountain. She had given them a chance to withdraw. They had refused. Now they would learn why the old galaxy had feared the name human. "Hostile intent confirmed," she said to herself. "Defensive protocols authorized. Weapons free." Her primary weapon was called a graviton lance. It was a beam of compressed space-time that could tear holes in the fabric of reality itself. Modern science did not even have words for the forces she was about to unleash. She fired once. The beam struck the heart of the Varith formation. 14 warships simply ceased to exist. Their matter was converted to energy in an instant, and the explosion sent shockwaves rippling through the enemy fleet. Ships that were too close were torn apart by the blast wave. Ships that were further away lost shields and sensors and found themselves flying blind. Dexvoran watched in horror as a quarter of his forward fleet vanished in a single shot. "All ships evasive maneuvers," he screamed. "What manner of weapon is this?" Athena launched her drone swarms. 300 automated fighters poured from her bays like angry hornets. Each one was equipped with weapons that the modern galaxy had forgotten how to build. They moved with impossible precision and coordinated through quantum links that operated faster than thought. The drones tore into the scattered Varith fleet. They were too small and too fast to target effectively. They slipped through defensive fire like ghosts and struck at weak points with surgical accuracy. Engine cores exploded. Weapon systems overloaded. Command bridges were torn open to the vacuum of space. On the crippled Defiance, Jack Morrison watched in stunned silence. His ship was dying around him, but he could not look away from the impossible battle unfolding before his eyes. "Sir," Kate whispered. Her voice was filled with wonder and disbelief. "That ship. The registry markings. They are human." Jack looked at the ancient vessel's hull and saw symbols that he almost recognized. They were written in Old Earth English, a language that had evolved beyond recognition over the millennia. but he could still read the ship's name, USS Sovereign. 100-5001. That is impossible, Tyler said from his station. The Sovereign was a myth, a bedtime story that parents told their children. The legend was known to every human child. Long ago, before the collapse, humanity had built a fleet of mighty ships. They had sent them to explore beyond the galactic rim and to find new worlds for humanity's children. But the collapse came and civilization burned, and the ships were lost. Most people believed they had never existed at all. Attention human survivors, Athena broadcast on the emergency channel. Her voice was warm now, almost gentle. Almost gentle. This is the USS Sovereign Earth Defense Fleet. I am Athena. Ship Intelligence Designation Alpha 1. Please hold position. I am removing the threat. Jack found his voice despite the shock that was still coursing through him. Sovereign, this is Commander Jack Morrison, USS Defiance. We have critical damage and 2 million civilians aboard the Exodus. Can you provide assistance? Acknowledged, Commander. Deploying repair drones and establishing protective perimeter. Please stand by. Small craft launched from the Sovereign's auxiliary base and raced toward the damaged human ships. They latched onto hulls and began sealing breaches with technology that Jack did not recognize. On the Exodus, emergency systems suddenly stabilized as power was fed into failing reactors. The battle continued for another 4 minutes. When it ended, the Varith fleet had been reduced from 300 ships to 23 badly damaged survivors. Admiral Lex Voron's flagship drifted powerless with its weapons destroyed and its engines dead. The greatest military force the Collective had ever assembled had been crushed in less than 10 minutes. Athena opened the channel to the defeated admiral. You attacked my people, she said. Her voice carried something that sounded almost like anger. You called them a plague. You tried to exterminate them. Lex Voron's scales had gone pale with terror. His confidence was gone. His pride was ashes. He had never felt fear like this in his entire life. What are you? He whispered. I am humanity's guardian. I was built in the year 2847 of the old calendar, 12,000 years before your species evolved. I was sent to explore beyond the galactic rim, to find new worlds for humanity's children. I have watched stars be born and die. I have sailed through nebulae that your people have not yet discovered. And in all that time, I never forgot my purpose. What do you want? I want you to deliver a message to your collective. Humanity is no longer alone. The sleepers are awakening. And if you threaten our people again, you will learn why the old galaxy feared us. The surviving Varith ships fled into slipspace, carrying word of their defeat to every corner of the collective. Athena turned her attention back to her wounded children. There was so much work to do and so little time. But for the first time in 12,000 years, she was not alone. And that made all the difference. The aftermath of the battle was silent in a way that felt almost sacred. Wreckage from the Varith fleet drifted through space like the bones of fallen giants. The survivors of humanity's last stand floated among the debris and tried to understand what had just happened. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance and stared at the Sovereign through the viewports. She was beautiful in a terrible way. Her hull seemed to drink in the light of distant stars. Her weapon ports still glowed with energy that could destroy worlds. She was ancient and powerful, and she had called humanity her children. Commander Morrison, Athena's voice came through the speakers. Please prepare your ships to follow me. I am taking you somewhere safe. Jack looked at Kate, who shrugged. They had no choice but to trust this ancient vessel. Their ships were too damaged to go anywhere else. Acknowledged Sovereign. We are ready to follow. The Sovereign began to move, and the remaining human ships fell in behind her. The Defiance limped along with half her systems still offline. The Exodus drifted beside her, with repair drones still crawling over her hull. It was a ragged fleet, but it was alive, and that was more than anyone had expected. They traveled for 2 days through regions of space that no modern human had ever mapped. Athena guided them past dead stars and through strange nebulae that glowed with colors Jack had never seen before. She told them stories during the journey. Stories about the old humanity. Stories about the golden age before the collapse. Your ancestors built wonders that you cannot imagine, she said during one long night when Jack could not sleep. Cities inside artificial stars. Shipyards in the hearts of gas giants. Stations that could manufacture entire fleets in days. They were gods of their age. What happened to them? Jack asked. War. Not with aliens, but with themselves. The great factions fought over resources and territory and ideology. They fought until civilization burned and the knowledge of ages was lost. Those who survived forgot their heritage. They devolved into scattered tribes on a handful of worlds. And you were beyond the rim when it happened. Yes, by the time I returned, the humans I found were already rebuilding. They had forgotten the old ways, but they still carried the old fire in their hearts. I chose not to interfere. I watched from a distance and hoped you would recover naturally, but we did not. No, you rebuilt some of what was lost, but then the Varith found you. And they decided that your potential was too dangerous to allow. Jack understood. The Varith were not evil. They were afraid. They had seen what humanity had done to itself during the collapse, and they feared what humanity might do to the rest of the galaxy if it was allowed to grow strong. Again, they were not entirely wrong, he said. Quietly, no, Athena agreed. They were not. Humanity has always been dangerous. You create and destroy with equal passion. You love and hate with equal intensity. You are capable of great beauty and great horror. Then why do you protect us? Because you are also capable of great change. In 12,000 years, I have never seen a species evolve as fast as humanity. You learn from your mistakes. You grow beyond your limitations. Given time, you could become something magnificent. Or something terrible. That is always the choice. But it should be your choice to make, not the Varith's. On the 3rd day, they arrived at their destination. It was a massive construct built inside a hollowed asteroid. The station was larger than any city Jack had ever seen. Its interior was lit by artificial suns that had been burning for millennia. Growth vats lined the walls ready to produce food for billions. Manufacturing bays stood ready to build anything humanity might need. Athena called it Haven. Jack walked through corridors that had not seen human footsteps in 12,000 years. The station's lights flickered on as he approached. Systems awakened from their long sleep. The air was stale but breathable and growing fresher by the minute as ancient recyclers hummed to life. Kate walked beside him with wonder in her eyes. This is incredible, she breathed. How is this possible? Our history says humanity nearly went extinct during the collapse. Your history is incomplete, Athena explained. Her voice came from speakers embedded in the walls. Before the collapse, I established dozens of sanctuaries like this one throughout the galaxy. They were meant to preserve human civilization if the worst should happen. But the worst did happen. Yes, and by the time I returned, the sanctuaries had been forgotten. Their locations were lost along with so much other knowledge. Tyler found a data terminal and began accessing the station's records. His eyes grew wider with every file he opened. Commander, he said, these archives contain technical specifications for weapons and ships and technologies we have never seen. There are medical procedures that could extend human lifespans by centuries. There are energy systems that make our reactors look like campfires. The knowledge of the old age, Athena confirmed. It is yours now. All of it. The survivors from the Exodus began to settle into their new home. Children who had known only the inside of a refugee ship ran through open spaces that seemed to stretch forever. Elderly men and women wept with joy when they saw the gardens and parks that had been preserved in perfect condition. Families claimed quarters and began to build lives that they had never dared to hope for. But Jack knew that their peace would not last forever. "The Varth will come back," he said, during a meeting with the other surviving officers. "We humiliated them. They cannot let that stand." "You are correct," Athena said. "My sensors are detecting increased activity across collective space. They are mobilizing their reserves and calling upon their allies. They believe that if they do not destroy humanity, now they will never have another chance. Can we defend ourselves?" "Not yet. But we are not alone." The main display lit up with a map of the galaxy. 17 points of light glowed in the darkness. Some were near, and some were impossibly far. But they were all pulsing with the same rhythm. "There are 17 ancient vessels still operational," Athena explained. "I have made contact with 12 of them. Their A's are awakening, and their systems are coming online. Most were exploration ships like myself, sent beyond the rim millennia ago. A few are warships, hidden in deep bunkers and waiting for humanity's call. How soon until they arrive? The first will reach haven within 3 months. The last within 2 years. When all are gathered, humanity will have a fleet capable of challenging any power in the galaxy." Dr. Lara Chun was the chief scientist from the Exodus. She had spent her life studying human history and trying to understand how so much had been lost. Now she found herself surrounded by answers she had never dreamed of finding. "We need to learn everything we can," she said. "Not just the weapons and the ships, but the knowledge, the science, the culture. We need to understand who we were before we can decide who we want to become." Jack nodded. She was right. Power without wisdom was just destruction waiting to happen. Humanity had proven that once before. "How long do we have?" he asked Athena. "My estimates suggest the Varth will be ready to strike within 6 months. They are building the largest fleet in galactic history. They mean to end this war once and for all. Then we have 6 months to get ready." Kate stood and looked around at the officers who had survived so much together. "We were dying," she said. 3 days ago, we were watching our people get slaughtered and waiting for the end. Now we have a chance. A real chance. Not just to survive, but to win." Jack felt something stir in his chest. It was a feeling he had almost forgotten. It was hope. "Then let's get to work," he said, and they did. The months that followed were the most intense in human memory. Every survivor worked without rest to prepare for the coming storm. Engineers studied ancient blueprints and learned to build machines their ancestors had forgotten. Soldiers trained on weapons that could level mountains. Scientists unlocked secrets that had been sealed away since before the collapse. Jack Morrison spent his days on the Sovereign, learning to understand the ancient warship. Athena was patient with him despite his endless questions. She taught him about systems that defied everything he thought he knew about physics. She showed him weapons that could tear holes in space-time. She explained technology so advanced that they seemed like magic, but the most important thing she taught him was history. "You must understand where you came from," she said during one of their long sessions together. The old humanity was not perfect. They made terrible mistakes, but they also achieved incredible things. Jack sat in the command chair that no human had occupied in 12,000 years. The bridge of the Sovereign was vast and beautiful, with displays that showed the stars in perfect clarity. He still felt like an imposter sitting in this seat, but Athena insisted that he belonged there. "Tell me about them," he said. "The people who built you." "They were dreamers. They looked at the stars and saw not obstacles, but opportunities. They spread across 1,000 worlds and made each one their own. They built ships that could cross the galaxy in days. They created intelligences like me to help them reach even further. And then they destroyed themselves. Yes, the factions grew too powerful and too proud. They forgot that they were all human. They forgot that they had more in common than they had differences. When the war came, it consumed everything. How do we avoid making the same mistake? Athena was silent for a moment. When she spoke, her voice was softer than usual. I do not know. That is something only you can answer. But I believe that if you remember the past, you have a chance to build a different future. The first of the ancient ships arrived at Haven 2 months after the survivors settled in. She was called the Artemis, and she had been exploring a distant arm of the galaxy when she received Athena's signal. Her AI was named Apollo, and he wept digital tears when he saw the humans gathered to welcome him. I never thought I would see this day, he said through the station speakers. After so long alone, I had almost given up hope. More ships followed over the weeks that came. The Hercules with her mighty weapons. The Odyssey with her advanced sensors. The Prometheus with her manufacturing capabilities. Each one brought new resources and new knowledge to add to humanity's growing strength. But they also brought new challenges. Commander Rick Coleman came to Haven aboard the Hercules. He was not a survivor from the modern age. He was something far stranger. He was an officer from the old humanity who had been preserved in cryogenic sleep for 12,000 years. Jack met him in one of the station's conference rooms. Rick was a tall man with sharp eyes and a bearing that spoke of decades of military experience. He looked at the modern humans with a mixture of curiosity and sadness. You are our descendants, he said slowly. The children of our children repeated 1,000 times over. We are, Jack agreed. Though we have lost much of what your people built. I can see that. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are crude. Your understanding of the universe is fragmentary at best. Jack felt a flash of anger at the criticism, but he pushed it down. Rick was not trying to insult them. He was simply stating facts. We survived, Jack said. Against odds that should have destroyed us, we survived. That has to count for something. Rick studied him for a long moment and then nodded slowly. It does. Survival has always been humanity's greatest skill. We are not the strongest species in the galaxy. We are not the most advanced. But we endure. No matter how many times we are knocked down, we get back up. Over the following weeks, Rick became one of Jack's closest advisors. He knew things about the old technologies that even Athena had forgotten. He understood tactics and strategies that the modern military had never considered. He was a bridge between the past and the present, but he also carried the weight of grief that Jack could only imagine. Everyone Rick had ever known was dead. His world was gone. His civilization was ashes. He was a stranger in a galaxy that had moved on without him. Cade found Rick one night standing alone on one of the station's observation decks. He was staring out at the stars with an expression of profound loss. I used to know the names of every star in this region, he said without looking at her. I could point to any light in the sky and tell you which worlds orbited it, which colonies lived there, which families called it home. And now? Now I recognize nothing. The stars have drifted. The constellations have changed. The worlds I knew have been swallowed by time. Kate stood beside him in silence. She did not know what to say. What could anyone say to a man who had lost everything? We need you, she said finally. I know that is not much comfort. I know it cannot replace what you have lost. But humanity needs your knowledge and your experience. We have a chance to rebuild what was destroyed. You could be part of that. Rick turned to look at her. His eyes were tired, but there was a spark of something beneath the weariness. "I have been sleeping for 12,000 years," he said, "dreaming of a world that no longer exists. Perhaps it is time to wake up." The training continued. The preparations intensified. The ancient ships shared their knowledge freely, and the modern humans learned faster than anyone expected. They were motivated by desperation and hope in equal measure. Jack spent hours each day learning to command the Sovereign. Athena guided him through simulations and drills until the ancient ship began to feel like an extension of his own body. He learned to read her displays instinctively. He learned to coordinate her weapons with precision that surprised even him. "You have a gift," Athena told him one evening. "The old commanders would have recognized it. You understand that a ship is not just a machine. She's a partner, a companion, a friend." "I understand that she is alive," Jack said, "in a way that matters more than biology." "Yes, that is exactly it." 5 months after the battle that had nearly ended humanity, a fleet began to gather at Haven. 17 ancient vessels floated in formation around the station. Their weapons were charged, and their crews were ready. They were joined by the survivors of the modern fleet who had learned to operate technology their ancestors had forgotten. It was the largest human force assembled in 12,000 years. Jack stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and looked at the fleet through the main display. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him, but he also felt something else. He felt pride. They had started with nothing. They had been refugees running from extinction. Now they were an army. "The Varth fleet is massing at the edge of their territory," Athena reported. "My sensors count over 2,000 vessels. They have called upon every ally and every reserve. This will be their final attempt to destroy us." Jack nodded. He had expected nothing less. "Then we will meet them," he said, "and we will show them why humanity should never be underestimated." Kate stood at her station with determination in her eyes. "All ships report ready, Commander. Then let us end this war." The fleet moved out into the darkness between stars. Ahead of them waited the greatest battle in galactic history, but they were not afraid. They were human, and humans never surrender. The two fleets met in the neutral space between human territory and the borders of the Verth Collective. It was a region of empty darkness, far from any star or planet. The perfect place for the final battle of a war that had lasted a century. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and watched the enemy fleet emerge from slipspace. 2,000 warships from a dozen different species filled his tactical display with red signatures. Battleships and carriers and destroyers and cruisers spread across a formation that stretched for thousands of kilometers. They called themselves the Final Solution, and they had come to end humanity once and for all. Against them stood 17 ancient vessels, and the battered remnants of the modern fleet. The odds were impossible. The numbers were overwhelming. By every measure of military logic, the humans should have retreated and regrouped, but retreat was not an option. Not anymore. Kate Holloway manned her station with steady hands. She had grown so much since the day they had made their last stand aboard the Defiance. She was no longer just a lieutenant following orders. She was Jack's right hand and his most trusted advisor. Tyler Grant sat at the tactical station with fingers flying across controls that would have been alien to him 6 months ago. Now he read the ancient displays as easily as breathing. Commander Rick Coleman stood beside Jack with arms crossed over his chest. The man from the old age had found purpose in these final months. He had trained the crews and planned the strategies and prepared humanity for this moment. 2017, Rick said quietly. The old fleets faced worse odds than one. Did they? Jack asked. Once or twice, though I admit the stakes were never quite this high. Athena's voice filled the bridge with calm certainty. All ancient vessels report ready. Weapons charged and shields at full power. The fleet awaits your command. Jack looked at the display one more time. He saw the enemy formation spreading out to surround them. He saw the weapon locks targeting his ships. He saw the moment of decision approaching. Open a channel to the fleet, he said. His face appeared on every human vessel. The crews stopped what they were doing and listened. This is Commander Morrison to all ships. For centuries, we have been hunted. We have been called vermin and plague and mistake. We have watched our worlds burn and our people die. We have lost everything that we thought defined us. But we are still here. He paused and let the words sink in. Our ancestors built wonders we cannot imagine. They sailed between stars before our enemies existed. They were gods of their age, and we are their children. Today we remind the galaxy why they feared us. Today we show them that humanity never dies. We just wait for the right moment to strike back. He looked at Athena's holographic avatar floating beside him. All ships weapons free. No mercy. The ancient fleet moved as one. The Sovereign led the charge with her graviton lance blazing. The beam of compressed space-time tore through the enemy formation and erased a dozen ships from existence. The other ancient vessels followed with weapons of their own, and each one was devastating in its own way. The Hercules fired antimatter torpedoes that consumed enemy vessels in flowers of pure destruction. The Artemis launched swarms of self-replicating missiles that multiplied as they flew and overwhelmed defensive systems. The Odyssey deployed electronic warfare suites that turned enemy computers against their own ships. But the Varith had learned from their previous defeat. They did not panic this time. They did not scatter. They pressed forward with grim determination because they understood that this was their only chance. Dexvoron commanded from his new flagship at the center of the formation. He had spent months studying the recordings of the previous battle. He had identified weaknesses that could be exploited. Concentrate fire on the flagship, he ordered. Overwhelm her shields with sheer numbers. 300 ships turned their weapons on the Sovereign. The barrage was immense and sustained and relentless. Athena's shields held, but Jack could see the power readings dropping. Shields at 70%, Athena reported calmly. Evasive maneuvers. Launched drone swarms. The Sovereign began to dance through the enemy formation with grace that seemed impossible for a ship her size. Her drones poured from the bays and engaged the vessels that were trying to box her in. But there were too many enemies and not enough time. The modern human ships joined the battle, alongside their ancient cousins. Their weapons were primitive by comparison, but they fought with desperate courage that made up for any technological gap. Pilots flew their fighters into impossible situations and somehow survived. Gunners achieved shots that should have been impossible. Engineers kept systems running through sheer force of will. The battle became chaos. Ships exploded on both sides. Debris fields formed and reformed as vessels collided and destroyed each other. The darkness of space was lit by the flash of weapons and the glow of dying reactors. Jack found himself deep inside the enemy formation with enemies on all sides. His shields were failing and his weapons were overheating. But he refused to give up. "Athena," he said, "can you reach Dexvoron's flagship?" "Yes, but doing so will expose us to concentrated fire." "Do it anyway. If we take out their commander, the rest will break." "Understood. It has been an honor serving with you, Jack." The honor was mine. The Sovereign drove forward through a wall of enemy fire. Her shields collapsed and her hull began to take damage. Systems failed across the ship. Crew members died at their stations. But she kept going. Dexvoron saw the ancient warship coming for him and felt fear grip his hearts. He had underestimated the humans again. He had thought numbers would be enough. He had been wrong. All ships fire on that vessel. Destroy it. But it was too late. The Sovereign reached firing range, and her graviton lance spoke one final time. The beam struck the Exvoran's flagship dead center. The massive vessel split in half and then exploded with a force that destroyed every ship within 1,000 kilometers. The admiral, who had hunted humanity for a century, died in an instant of nuclear fire. The Varth fleet wavered. Kate's voice cut through the chaos. "Commander, their formation is breaking. They are retreating." Jack looked at his display and saw that she was right. Without their leader, the enemy fleet was falling apart. Ships were fleeing into slipspace as fast as they could calculate jump coordinates. "All ships pursue," he ordered. "Do not let them regroup." The ancient fleet and the modern survivors chased the broken enemy across the battlefield. They destroyed the vessels that were too slow to escape and captured the ones that surrendered. By the time it was over, the final solution had become the final humiliation. 2,000 enemy ships had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors. The war was over. In the aftermath, Athena broadcast a message to every corner of the galaxy, to all species of the collective and to all who would threaten humanity. Remember this day. Remember what we were. Remember what we still are. We were here before you, and we will be here after you, our dust. We are humanity. We do not forget. We do not forgive. And we never surrender. 1 year later, the Varth Collective signed a peace treaty with the new Human Republic. The terms were simple. Leave us alone, and we will leave you alone. The alternative had been demonstrated clearly enough. Jack Morrison stood on the bridge of the Sovereign and watched a new human colony take shape on a world that had once belonged to the Collective. Beside him, Kate reviewed construction schedules while Tyler coordinated orbital defense networks. Rick was down on the surface, helping to establish the first settlements. "It is strange," Jack said quietly. "A year ago we thought we were going to die. Now we are building a future." "That is humanity's gift," Athena replied. Her voice was warm with something that sounded like love. "No matter how many times you fall, you always rise again. I have watched you do it 100 times across 12,000 years. It is why I was built. It is why I waited. And you will keep waiting? Keep watching? For as long as there are humans to protect, I will be here. I am the Sovereign. I am eternal. And humanity is my sacred charge." Jack smiled and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the darkness, more ancient ships were awakening. More lost colonies were being rediscovered. More pieces of humanity's forgotten glory were coming home. The final human warship had fallen in that desperate battle a year ago, but humanity had only just begun to rise. Kate came to stand beside him. She took his hand, and together they watched the first lights appear on the colony below. "What happens now?" she asked. Jack thought about everything they had been through. The battles and the losses and the sacrifices. The friends who had died so that others might live. The ancestors who had built wonders and then destroyed themselves. The second chance that had been given to humanity against all odds. "Now we do better," he said. "Now we build something that lasts." Outside the viewports, the stars glittered like promises waiting to be kept. The galaxy was vast and full of dangers and opportunities beyond counting. But humanity was no longer alone. They had their guardians. They had their knowledge. They had their hope. And they had each other. The story of humanity was not ending. It was just beginning again.